In January of 49 BCE, under cover of night, Julius Caesar, governor of Cisalpine Gaul, stood on the banks of the Rubicon River. This narrow waterway in northern Italy marked the official boundary between his province and the heartland of the Roman Republic. Crossing it with an armed force was an unambiguous act of treason under Roman law. Nevertheless, Caesar faced a stark choice: yield to the Senate's ultimatum or march on Rome and risk igniting a civil war. Over the preceding decade, Caesar's conquests in the Gallic Wars had expanded Rome's influence across vast territories, earning him immense popularity and a devoted army. Yet this very success sowed distrust among the Senate, particularly Caesar's former ally, Pompey the Great. As tensions escalated and diplomacy failed, Caesar made the fateful decision to wade into the icy waters of the Rubicon, declaring alia iacta est, the die is cast. Why did one of Rome's most brilliant generals choose a path so perilous, knowing it would plunge the Republic into chaos? We will trace the steps that led to the crossing of the Rubicon, examine the swift march to Rome, and follow the conflict all the way to the plains of Pharsalus, where Caesar's destiny and the fate of the Roman Republic would be decided.
Did you know that most people who watch our documentaries aren't subscribed yet? If you enjoy animated maps and history, join our community. Leave a like and subscribe so you never miss the next episodes.
Between 58 and 50 BCE, Julius Caesar led the Gallic Wars, conquering modern-day France, Belgium, and parts of Germany. These campaigns enriched Rome with spoils of war, fostered strong loyalty among Caesar's legionaries due to shared hardships, and won him immense popularity among ordinary Romans. By securing strategic rivers like the Rhine and establishing alliances with local tribes, Caesar extended Rome's frontier northward, boosted trade routes, and showcased Roman engineering by repeatedly crossing the Alps. In 60 BCE, Caesar initially governed in tandem with Pompey the Great and Crassus, forming the first triumvirate. However, Crassus's death in 53 BCE at the Battle of Carrhae in Parthia and Pompey's pivot to the Senate fractured their alliance. Rivalry over wealth, influence, and military glory intensified, while Rome faced lingering threats on its eastern borders from Hellenistic states and remained wary of potential conflicts in newly subjugated Gallic territories. The breakdown of the triumvirate set the stage for a broader power struggle. Alarmed by Caesar's rising influence and the loyalty of about 10 battle-hardened legions, totaling approximately 40,000 infantry and 1,000 cavalry, that followed him unwaveringly, the Senate demanded he disband these forces before re-entering Rome. Concerned that a victorious general returning from Gaul might topple Republican checks and balances, they trusted Pompey, once Caesar's ally, to contain him. The Senate feared Rome's overreach beyond the Alps, worrying that divided leadership at home would expose the Republic to barbarian incursions or opportunistic maneuvers by rival powers in the eastern Mediterranean. By early 49 BCE, the Senate, driven by Pompey's influence, issued an ultimatum. Caesar must disband his army and return to Rome as a private citizen or face the charge of treason. Hoping to avoid civil war, Caesar offered to stand down if Pompey did likewise. When the Senate refused, Caesar proposed a compromise. He would relinquish all but one province and one legion. However, the Senate, emboldened by Pompey's pledge to defend Rome, rejected each of Caesar's offers. They passed the Senatus Consultum Ultimum, final decree, labeling Caesar a public enemy unless he immediately surrendered his command. For Caesar, relinquishing his legions, most of which were stationed across Transalpine Gaul to maintain control over the northern frontier, while only the 13th Legion was with him in Cisalpine Gaul, meant losing not only his political power, but also risking prosecution, exile, or even death. Negotiations collapsed, leaving Caesar with a binary choice: submit to the Senate's demands or take drastic action. Though small in width, the Rubicon marked the northern limit of Italy proper. Crossing it with an armed force violated a centuries-old Roman law, the Lex de Imperio, designed to protect the Republic from military coups. This action on January 10, 49 BCE was not merely a geographical crossing, but a public declaration that Caesar was willing to defy the Senate. Alia iacta est, The die is cast. Contemporary accounts suggest Caesar uttered these famous words as he stepped into the icy waters. This moment signaled the point of no return. Any further attempts at negotiation were all but doomed. Caesar began the crossing with only a small contingent of his veteran 13th Legion to make a bold statement. In the following days, the rest of the legionaries followed. This staggered approach maintained strategic flexibility while ensuring the initial act of defiance was front and center in Rome's collective mind. After crossing the Rubicon on January 10, 49 BCE, Caesar's swift campaign began with the capture of Ariminum, modern-day Rimini. His 13th Legion, renowned for its discipline and loyalty, moved rapidly along the Italian peninsula, securing key towns like Pisarum, Pizarro, and Osimo without resistance. Caesar's reputation for clemency and strategic brilliance encouraged local leaders and garrisons to surrender peacefully, avoiding unnecessary bloodshed. By late January, Caesar turned his attention to Corfinium, where Domitius Ahenobarbus had fortified himself with approximately 10,000 men. Caesar besieged the town, cutting off supplies and escape routes. After a brief standoff, Domitius's troops mutinied and surrendered the garrison to Caesar. Demonstrating his calculated strategy of clemency, Caesar spared Domitius and his men, reinforcing his image as a fair and just leader, willing to avoid unnecessary destruction. Following his success at Corfinium, Caesar marched south to Brundisium, a vital Adriatic port where Pompey the Great had retreated with Senate forces. Hoping to trap Pompey before he could flee to Greece, Caesar proposed direct negotiations to avoid further conflict, but this suggestion went unanswered. Caesar's forces attempted to blockade the harbor by constructing earthworks, but Pompey's superior naval fleet allowed him to evacuate his army and key Senate allies to Greece under cover of night. Although Pompey eluded capture, Caesar's control over Italy was now absolute. By mid-March, Caesar entered Rome unopposed, bringing with him approximately 5,000 men of the 13th Legion. After entering Rome unopposed, Julius Caesar seized the Roman treasury to fund his campaign, portraying himself as the protector of Roman stability. He framed his actions as necessary to defend the Republic against a corrupt Senate dominated by Pompey the Great and self-serving aristocrats. Caesar emphasized that his dignity and the loyalty of his legions, hardened by years of service in the Gallic Wars, were under attack, justifying his bold decisions to the Roman people. Meanwhile, the Senate branded Caesar a public enemy through the Senatus Consultum Ultimum, accusing him of treason and undermining the Republic's stability. However, Caesar's victories at Corfinium and Brundisium demonstrated his exceptional blend of strategy, speed, and psychological warfare. These triumphs, combined with his image as a man of the people, swayed public opinion. As Pompey regrouped in Greece, Caesar's dominance over Italy ensured the civil war would escalate to an unprecedented confrontation. With Rome and much of Italy under his control, Caesar set his sights on Pompey, who had regrouped in Greece. There, Pompey commanded roughly 40,000 infantry and 7,000 cavalry, backed by wealthy eastern provinces. Caesar's force was smaller, about 22,000 infantry and 1,000 cavalry, but battle-hardened from years of campaigning. Pompey dominated the seas, making Caesar's crossing of the Adriatic perilous. Still, Caesar led part of his army across, near Palaeust in Neprius, while Mark Antony later reinforced him under cover of night. This high-risk maneuver ensured Caesar could establish a foothold in Greece before Pompey could coordinate a defense. Near Dyrrhachium, Pompey initially forced Caesar to retreat by inflicting considerable losses. Yet Pompey held back from pressing his advantage. Encouraged by advisors and convinced of eventual victory, he maintained a cautious approach, allowing Caesar time to recover and reposition inland. Under growing pressure from the Senate and his officers, Pompey abandoned his defensive strategy. Both armies converged on the plains of Pharsalus in central Greece, setting the stage for a confrontation that would decide Rome's fate. Pharsalus offered flat, open terrain, ideal for Pompey's 7,000 cavalry, which far outnumbered Caesar's 1,000. With the Enipeus River guarding one flank, Pompey positioned his forces to exploit his superior horsemen and overwhelm Caesar's exposed lines. In anticipation of this attack, Caesar deployed 22,000 infantry in a disciplined formation and concealed an additional 3,000 foot soldiers behind his front ranks, instructing them to strike at the legs of Pompey's horses to neutralize their mobility. When the battle began, Pompey's cavalry charged, hoping to sweep around Caesar's flank. At the decisive moment, Caesar's hidden reserves rushed forward and targeted the vulnerable horsemen, driving them into disorder. With Pompey's flanks suddenly exposed, Caesar's legionaries advanced relentlessly, their discipline overwhelming the numerically larger but now panicked army. By the end, Pompey's forces had suffered approximately 15,000 dead and 20,000 captured, while Caesar's losses remained minimal. Pompey fled to Egypt, where he was betrayed and assassinated upon arrival. Although the civil war continued in other regions, Caesar's stunning triumph at Pharsalus solidified his authority and marked a crucial turning point in Roman history. Julius Caesar's bold defiance, crossing the Rubicon and marching on Rome, shook the foundations of the Roman Republic. His triumph at Pharsalus demonstrated that the will of a single, determined commander, backed by devoted legions, could override the traditional checks of senatorial rule. Yet such ambition came at a cost. The civil war, far from over, would spread across the Mediterranean, engulfing provinces and allies in its wake. As Caesar pursued Pompey to Egypt and confronted resistance in Africa and Spain, the Republic's political structures continued to fracture. His actions remain a testament to how a convergence of personal ambition, military loyalty, and the failures of political rivals can transform the destiny of a civilization, leading Rome toward autocracy and its imperial future. With one thunderous blow on the plains of Pharsalus, Julius Caesar shattered the last bastion of Pompey's resistance. As the smoke cleared and legions dispersed, Caesar refused to bask in victory. He set his gaze on the eastern horizon, vowing to hunt down his fleeing rival and bring Rome's civil war to a swift, decisive end. Meanwhile, Ptolemaic Egypt teetered on the edge of crisis. Cleopatra VII, recently ousted from power, and her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII, were locked in a contentious struggle that divided the kingdom's court. Despite the internal strife, the wealth of the Nile and the kingdom's strategic location made Egypt a vital ally, or a tempting prize, for any Roman seeking regional dominance. Pompey, hoping to regroup and secure political leverage, set his sights on Alexandria. Yet his arrival collided with the rising tensions between Cleopatra's supporters and those loyal to Ptolemy XIII. In this fraught atmosphere, Caesar's pursuit of Pompey would soon intertwine with Egypt's own civil discord, altering the fate of both realms. In the aftermath of his triumph at Pharsalus in August 48 BCE, Julius Caesar wasted no time pursuing his vanquished rival, Pompey the Great. Anticipating that Pompey might seek refuge among Rome's client states in the east, Caesar set sail across the Aegean, determined to end the civil war swiftly. Pompey, hoping to rebuild his strength and secure a political alliance, chose Egypt, once friendly to him in previous conflicts, as his destination. Arriving on Egyptian shores in late 48 BCE, Pompey was met not by the warm welcome he expected, but by a cold, calculated betrayal. Acting on orders from King Ptolemy XIII's closest advisors, eager to curry favor with Caesar, Egyptian officials lured Pompey ashore and assassinated him. Only days later, Caesar disembarked in Alexandria and received the grim news. His one-time ally, now mortal enemy, had been murdered without a trial. Outraged by this breach of Roman dignity, Caesar announced his intention to remain in Egypt as a mediator. His arrival in Alexandria would soon place him at the center of a simmering power struggle between the young Ptolemy XIII and his exiled sister, Cleopatra VII, setting the stage for one of history's most fateful encounters. By late 48 BCE, tensions within the Ptolemaic court in Alexandria were at a boiling point. King Ptolemy XIII, heavily influenced by his advisors, had exiled his co-ruler and sister, Cleopatra VII. in a bid to secure uncontested power. With Julius Caesar now in Egypt, Cleopatra seized a daring chance to reclaim her throne. According to later accounts, she arranged to be smuggled into the royal palace, famously hidden in a rug or sack, so she could meet Caesar face to face without alerting her enemies. This bold strategy underscored Cleopatra's political acumen. By appealing directly to Caesar, she outflanked her brother's inner circle and gained the support of Rome's most powerful general. Cleopatra understood that Caesar's favor could tip the balance of power in her favor. From their first meeting, she impressed him with her intelligence and command of languages, painting herself as the rightful ruler who could ensure stability and fulfill Rome's interests. Already angered by Pompey's murder at the hands of Ptolemy XIII's advisors, Caesar saw an opportunity to mediate and assert Roman authority over Egypt's affairs. He demanded that Ptolemy XIII share power with Cleopatra, as prescribed by their father's will. The king's advisors, however, regarded Caesar's intervention as an intolerable threat to their influence. Fearing that Caesar would install Cleopatra as sole ruler, Ptolemy XIII's forces, likely numbering around 20,000 men, significantly outmatching Caesar's contingent of roughly 4,000 Roman troops, began to encircle the palace district. Thus began the protracted siege of Alexandria, which extended into early 47 BCE. For Caesar, Alexandria's narrow streets and tight quarters both hindered and helped his men. While it was difficult to maneuver large forces, the urban setting neutralized some of the Egyptians' numerical superiority. The Romans, holed up near the docks and royal palace, faced shortages of supplies and constant harassment by local militias loyal to Ptolemy XIII. Nonetheless, Cleopatra's allies provided critical support from within the city, supplying Caesar's troops with provisions and intelligence on enemy movements. As the siege wore on, fighting spilled into various corridors of the city. In one decisive struggle near the harbor, Caesar ordered ships burned to prevent the Egyptian fleet from blockading his position at sea. The flames spread uncontrollably, damaging sections of the city's renowned library of Alexandria. Though the extent of the destruction remains a matter of historical debate, ancient sources lament the loss of many works, highlighting the cultural cost of warfare. By early 47 BCE, Caesar received critical reinforcements from allies in the eastern Mediterranean, emboldening him to break out of Alexandria and confront Ptolemy XIII's army near the Nile Delta. In the ensuing battle, Ptolemy XIII's forces faltered under Roman discipline and Cleopatra's resurgent faction. Attempting to flee by boat, the young king drowned in the river, an ignominious end that marked Cleopatra's triumph. With her brother's death, Cleopatra reclaimed the throne with Caesar's backing. The outcome of the Egyptian civil war not only reshaped Ptolemaic rule, but also bound Egypt's fate more closely to Rome's rising star. By early 47 BCE, with the Alexandrian War concluded and Cleopatra VII reinstated on the throne, Egypt stood at a cultural crossroads. Despite recent turmoil, Alexandria retained its position as a leading Hellenistic metropolis, blending Greek, Egyptian, and Eastern influences. Scholars remained active in specialized institutions, while merchants traded goods from Arabia, Nubia, and beyond. Following her brother's defeat, Cleopatra swiftly consolidated power. She underscored her legitimacy through traditional Egyptian rites, identifying herself with the goddess Isis, and upheld Greek-style ceremonies to placate Alexandria's influential elites. With Caesar's backing, she secured authority across the Nile Delta, ensuring local administrators recognized her sovereignty. By balancing Greek and Egyptian institutions, Cleopatra presented herself as a unifying force in a fractured kingdom. Even Roman accounts praised Cleopatra's intelligence. She carefully projected an image of a cosmopolitan ruler adept in diplomacy, inviting Roman collaboration without surrendering her own prestige. Rumors that her alliance with Caesar went beyond politics only heightened her influence, placing her at the heart of Mediterranean power dynamics. For Caesar, involvement in Egypt served dual aims: securing vital grain supplies and bolstering his status as a statesman. His victory extended Rome's reach into a region long prized for its wealth. Though Egypt remained nominally independent, it grew increasingly reliant on Caesar's favor, foreshadowing deeper entanglements between Rome and the Ptolemaic throne. Strengthened by Caesar's victory, Cleopatra quickly consolidated her reign. By early 47 BCE, she and her younger brother, Ptolemy XIV, were nominally co-rulers, yet real power lay firmly in her hands. Caesar's continued presence signaled Rome's growing influence, but it also helped Cleopatra stabilize the kingdom. Local officials pledged loyalty, and resistance dissipated as the new regime promised both Egyptian tradition and Roman support. To showcase this unity, Cleopatra invited Caesar on a lavish voyage along the Nile. More than a simple tour, the expedition paraded Egypt's prosperity and cultural heritage. Priests performed sacred rites, regional leaders reaffirmed allegiance, and Roman officers observed a realm steeped in wealth. For Cleopatra, it was an opportunity to assert her stature. For Caesar, it revealed Egypt's vital role in his broader ambitions. Late in 47 BCE, Cleopatra gave birth to a son widely called Caesarion. Whether the Roman general formally acknowledged him remains debated. Yet the child's symbolic value was immense. Egyptians saw divine favor in the melding of two powerful bloodlines, while Romans whispered about Caesar's foreign entanglements. Ultimately, this dynastic link drew Rome and Egypt closer than ever, laying foundations for both a celebrated partnership and a looming political reckoning in the wider Mediterranean world. Departing Alexandria in mid-47 BCE, Julius Caesar headed north into Syria, determined to secure Rome's eastern provinces. While his Egyptian contingent remained modest, some sources suggest he led fewer than 10,000 men. These soldiers were battle-hardened from the Alexandrian War. Rumors of Pharnaces II of Pontus assembling an army of roughly 20,000 quickly reached Caesar. Pharnaces, son of Rome's old foe, Mithridates, had exploited the chaos of the civil war to reclaim territories once stripped from Pontus. After quelling local uprisings in Syria, Caesar marched eastward into Asia Minor, integrating auxiliary forces from loyal client rulers along the way. The two armies clashed near Zela, where Caesar's disciplined legions rapidly overwhelmed Pharnaces' numerically superior but less seasoned troops. In the aftermath, Caesar famously declared, "Veni, Vidi, Vici. I came, I saw, I conquered," capturing the swift nature of his triumph. During this time, Cleopatra, realizing her influence would grow by remaining close to Rome's power, sailed to Rome herself in 46 BCE, bringing her infant son, Caesarion. Her presence in the capital, living in Caesar's estate, caused whispers among the Senate and the Roman populace, foreshadowing a profound entanglement between the Republic and the Ptolemaic kingdom. After his victory over Pharnaces II in mid-47 BCE, Caesar secured Rome's eastern frontier. To finalize these gains, he marched across Asia Minor, reaffirming local alliances and reorganizing newly pacified territories. Crossing the Aegean, Caesar made a brief stop in Greece before sailing for Italy. Landing at Brundisium, he then traveled north, returning to Rome by the end of the year. There, he shifted focus to consolidating power and implementing broad reforms, setting the stage for the next decisive phase of his political career. Rome stood at the threshold of a new era, battered by years of civil war, yet eager for a decisive end. It was early in 46 BCE. Into this anxious atmosphere stepped Gaius Julius Caesar, returning from his lightning campaigns in Asia Minor. Fresh off victories against formidable foes, he crossed the Aegean Sea, landed at Brundisium, and marched north to the capital, where citizens crowded the streets to hail the seemingly unstoppable general. Yet behind the applause lay deep unease. The Senate, once aligned with Pompey, watched warily, for Caesar's popularity now eclipsed that of any rival. Meanwhile, remnants of Pompeian loyalists still clung to the faint hope of resistance. Seizing the moment, Caesar swiftly convened key officials and influential families, making it clear he intended to finish what he had begun. By this point in history, the world's population is estimated to have ranged between 200 and 250 million, with as many as 50 million living in territories bordering the Mediterranean. This meant Rome's struggle for dominance touched roughly a quarter of humanity, drawing resources and manpower from every corner of its vast domain. Against this backdrop, Caesar's goal was straightforward: eliminate lingering threats and secure the power needed to steer Rome's future, setting the stage for the final chapter of the Civil War and the sweeping reforms soon to follow. By early 46 BCE, North Africa had become the last major stronghold for Pompeian loyalists determined to resist Caesar's rise. Commanders such as Metellus Scipio and Marcus Porcius Cato, Cato the Younger, gathered what remained of the Pompeian forces, estimated at 25,000 to 30,000 men, including local auxiliaries, along the fertile coastline near Hadrumetum, modern Sousse in Tunisia. They hoped that by fortifying a coastal position, they could protect key maritime supply routes and, with some luck, repel Caesar's advance. Meanwhile, Caesar, resolved to end the civil war, sailed southward from Sicily with a similarly sized force of 25,000 to 30,000 troops, legionaries, cavalry, and aligned contingents. Upon landing in Africa, he secured local supply lines, gathered intelligence on Pompeian dispositions, and maneuvered his forces to force an engagement. The Pompeians ultimately chose Thapsus, a strategically located coastal town, for their defensive stand. Caesar capitalized on his troops' extensive combat experience by probing enemy lines and fortifying positions in preparation for a decisive attack. Shortly after the decisive outcome at Thapsus, where Caesar's legions decimated Pompeian forces, killing or capturing around 10,000 men, Marcus Porcius Cato, Cato the Younger, one of the staunchest defenders of the Republican cause, chose to end his life in Utica rather than submit to Caesar. While the battle itself had already delivered a fatal blow to the Pompeian position, Cato's suicide became a symbolic final stand. His death, alongside the crushing losses at Thapsus, effectively marked the end of significant opposition in North Africa. Caesar's subsequent return to Rome, celebrated by a grand triumph, set the stage for the next and final chapter of the Civil War in Hispania. With North Africa secured, Caesar returned to Rome in triumph. Over the following weeks, he celebrated 4 triumphs, commemorating his campaigns in Gaul, Egypt, Pontus, and now Africa. During these lavish processions, Caesar's own soldiers continued a long-standing tradition of irreverent banter, chanting bawdy verses that playfully mocked their general's rumored sexual appetites. Despite the jesting tone, the African triumph underscored Caesar's growing political supremacy. Nevertheless, the Civil War's final chapter awaited him far to the west, in Hispania. By early 45 BCE, the final embers of Pompeian resistance had gathered in Hispania, modern Spain, transforming it into the last major theater of the Civil War. Gnaeus Pompey and Sextus Pompey, the sons of the late Pompey the Great, joined forces with Titus Labienus, once Caesar's trusted lieutenant, now among the staunchest adversaries. Historical estimates suggest they could muster around 35,000 troops, a mix of Roman veterans and local auxiliaries. From strongholds in southeastern and southern Hispania, they prepared for a decisive showdown against Caesar's legions. Fresh from his triumphs in Rome, Caesar led an army of roughly comparable size westward, through Gaul and into Hispania. Despite the numbers being similar, his soldiers carried invaluable combat experience, having fought in Gaul, Egypt, and Africa. Caesar's objective was clear: cut off Pompeian supply lines and pin them down near Munda, a strategically vital town in the province of Baetica, modern Andalusia. Controlling Munda meant controlling the region's roads, resources, and ultimately, its fate. Munda would soon prove to be one of Caesar's most perilous battles of the entire Civil War. The Pompeian forces held high ground, raining down missiles and launching swift counterattacks that momentarily threw Caesar's lines into disarray. Alarmed by the sudden loss of momentum, Caesar rode to the front, personally urging his veterans to recall their past glories and stand firm. His presence revived their fighting spirit at the critical juncture, preventing what could have become a disastrous rout. Once his forces regained their footing, Caesar ordered a concentrated push against the Pompeian flank. The attritional struggle that followed saw Titus Labienus killed, while Gnaeus Pompey barely escaped, only to be caught and executed shortly after. Though casualty figures vary in the ancient sources, they agree that the Pompeians suffered catastrophic losses, effectively ending organized resistance to Caesar's rule. Back in Rome, rumors circulated about a possible fifth triumph to celebrate the victory at Munda. Some ancient sources hint Caesar may have considered another grand procession, but the historical record was fragmentary and provided no definitive confirmation. Moreover, with 4 triumphs already held in 46 BCE, and mindful that Munda had pitted Romans against Romans, Caesar likely chose to avoid further controversy. Instead, he returned home to consolidate his unprecedented power, setting the stage for the final chapter of his extraordinary political career. By mid-45 BCE, with the final Pompeian resistance crushed at Munda, Julius Caesar returned to Rome as the uncontested master of the Republic. The Senate, eager to appease the man who had eliminated every rival, granted him Dictator Perpetuum, or Dictator for life. Traditionally, dictators served only brief terms in emergencies. Caesar's lifetime appointment thus marked a seismic shift in Rome's political framework. Having secured the realm, Caesar refocused on reforms aimed at unifying and modernizing the Republic. Chief among these was the Julian calendar, introduced to replace Rome's outdated lunar system. Drawing on Egyptian astronomical knowledge, Caesar instituted 365 days per year, plus a leap year every 4 years to align closely with the solar cycle. He also rationalized the mismatched lengths of months, allowing for a more consistent schedule of civic events. And to honor its creator, the month Quintilis was renamed Lulius, from which we derive July. Though Pope Gregory XIII later refined the system, creating the Gregorian calendar, Caesar's model remains largely recognizable to us today, an enduring testament to how advanced Roman administrative thinking could be. Beyond the calendar, Caesar expanded citizenship and governance. He extended Roman citizenship to select provincial elites in Gaul and Hispania, solidifying their loyalty and facilitating smoother administration. Meanwhile, he reorganized provincial rule, assigning officials to oversee fair tax collection and mitigate corruption. While these changes often favored his supporters, they also helped stabilize Rome's rapidly growing empire. On the socio-economic front, Caesar addressed debt by passing relief measures, commissioned public works such as temples, basilicas, and forums, and enlarged the Senate to include new voices from across the provinces. Though critics saw this as diluting aristocratic power, Caesar positioned it as a progressive move toward broader representation. During his tenure as dictator, Julius Caesar spearheaded a wave of urban development that reshaped Rome's landscape. He founded new forums to handle mounting bureaucratic demands, easing congestion in the older Forum Romanum. Additional roads were constructed and existing ones improved, accelerating traffic flow and trade routes across the city. These enhancements not only streamlined daily life, but also boosted economic vitality, reflecting Rome's emerging status as a cosmopolitan hub. Caesar's vision for a grand, functional capital resonated with future emperors, Augustus, Trajan, and beyond, who expanded upon his initiatives, propelling Rome's skyline toward enduring architectural grandeur and global admiration for centuries. By consolidating political, military, and economic authority, Caesar became the principal architect of Rome's immediate destiny. His dictatorship promised much-needed stability, yet it also sparked fears about the future of republican governance. Even as he reshaped the state, discontent festered among senators who saw in Caesar's ever-growing powers a direct threat to Rome's ancient traditions, setting the stage for a dramatic final act in his extraordinary career. By 45 BCE, Julius Caesar stood at the apex of Roman power, having crushed all remaining Pompeian forces and secured broad authority. Crowned with the unprecedented title of Dictator Perpetuus, he overshadowed all rival factions. Yet apprehension simmered among senators alarmed by what they saw as creeping monarchy, reinforced by Caesar's boundless honors and the cult of personality around him. The expansion of the Senate, filling seats with Caesar's loyal supporters, eroded Rome's long-standing aristocracy and weakened republic checks and balances. As public adulation soared, talk of further honors, possibly even kingship, stirred desperation among the old elite. Though Caesar's reforms aimed to rebuild a fractured state, they also fueled suspicion that the Republic's core values were being swept aside. By early 44 BCE, resentment coalesced among key senators determined to protect the old order. Their plan took shape in whispers and closed-door meetings, culminating on the Ides of March, when Caesar's fellow Romans drew their blades. Thus ended his meteoric rise and ushered Rome toward a fateful crossroads in its history, forever altering the Republic's destiny. If you found this exploration of Caesar's final ascension insightful, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications for more deep dives into Roman history and beyond. Your support helps us bring the ancient world to life. Thanks for watching.